How's it going, gurus? We are back here today for another video on SOAR. This time, what we're going to be covering is setting up your own registry. Now, this registry can be used for lots of different things. We can have a registry set up just for our own internally built apps. Or, of course, we can mirror the Quay.io registry that IBM uses for their apps and actually keep all of our apps all in one location. And by doing that mirroring, the other thing that we can actually do is use that for an air gapped environment. So there's a couple different uses that we can do by building our own registry. And today I want to cover how to actually go ahead and build that registry. So I want to apologize too. I know it's been a while since I've had a video put out, but it's been a very busy year so far for me. And now I want to go ahead and dive in because I've been getting a lot of questions both in trainings and in videos about this specific topic on creating a registry and then also creating a air gapped environment. So let's go ahead and dive into the first part of this two-part series, where first we're going to build the repository, and then second, we're going to go ahead and build an air-gapped environment as well. So let's dive into this. All right. So first, I've got my instructions on the right-hand side. Now, you don't have to worry about trying to get this link figured out up top here. I actually have that link in the video below, so feel free to go ahead and dive into that if you want to follow along, and that way you can easily copy and paste these commands in yourself. The way we're going to be doing this today is if I run a quick command over here, you can see here that today for my demonstration, I'm going to be running this on CentOS Linux 7. So if you are using anything other than a Rails 7 instance, then you're probably going to have to go and find your own commands for some of these things. But for me, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and use this guide that I built over here, and we're going to be using that on a Rails 7 instance. All right, so the first thing we need to do, step one, is to actually install and get Docker up and running on our instance Linux here. So the way we're going to do that is go ahead and first run the sudo yum install -y Docker, and we're going to install Docker Compose. The reason that we're going to be installing both of these is actually because Docker will be what we're going to run our containers in. Docker Compose will allow us to build a YAML file and then quickly deploy and take down our instance of our registry here. All right, and now that we got that installed, let's go ahead and run the enable commands on the service. I'm going to run. Now that we've got it enabled, that will mean that every time the system gets rebooted or anything like that, it'll actually come up on start. We don't have to rerun this next command, which we're going to go ahead and start the service ourselves. All right. Now we've got the Docker service up and running. So now we can go ahead and move on to building the file structure for where we're actually going to be running the registry from. So let's go ahead and move to that next step there. So from here, you can see we're going to be running these commands here. We're actually just going to be making a couple of directories where we're going to go ahead and keep our auth files, our TLS certs, and the data that we're going to be storing in our registry. So let's go ahead and run these commands. Now that our file structure for this registry is created, let's go ahead and let's actually jump into that directory. But one thing to note before we jump into that directory, if you are using a system that is using SE Linux, then what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to run this extra command here, which is actually going to add some context to file structure so that the Docker instance will not get an access denied when it tries to start using that file structure because of our security system. Let's go ahead and run that in my environment here. Again, if you're not using SE Linux, then you don't have to worry about that. But since mine is running SE Linux, I'm going to go ahead and run that. So now that I've actually run that, let's go ahead and dive into our registry folder here. Now that I'm in that registry folder, let's go ahead and actually run the TLS commands for OpenSSL to actually build our certs so that we can have TLS set up and running on this so that we can have secure connections to our registry. All right, so our first step is actually going to be to run the certificate authority key. So let's go ahead and create that using that top command here. All right, and now that the key has been created for the certificate authority, let's go ahead and use that key to actually generate the certificate authority certification. Now that we've created the certificate authority key and then use that key to create the certificate authority certification, let's go ahead and create the registry key and certification as well. All right. Now that we've got the key and the private key and the private registry certification created, let's use that certification to actually inject it into that certificate authority certification as well. All right. Now that we've gone ahead and done that, I'm going to explain a couple of other things too. As we were going through here, we use these different commands here. Now you will have to make some changes to these commands. For instance, you're going to have to use whatever country code you're in. So I'm in the US, so I'll use US as my country code. For my state code, I'm in Ohio, so I'll go ahead and put OH as my location or as my state code there. But for my location, I'm from the Dayton area, so I'll go ahead and put Dayton in. Of course, you want to use whatever your organization is that you have going through all of this to make sure that it's for your organization. Now, this is if you are doing a self-signed cert. So if you are using a self-signed cert, these commands will work. But if you're using a signed cert, then go ahead and get your certs however you need to get those so that you can actually use your certs. We're just going to need the cert or the registry cert. We're going to need the registry key, and then we're also going to need the certificate authority cert as well. So once we get all those, that's all we'll need, and then we can move forward. Now that we've moved forward and we've actually gotten the certificate authority key, or the certificates, then let's go ahead and actually install the certificate authority for Docker so that Docker knows that it can use that self-signed cert, and then we'll have to update the CA trust as well with that. So the first thing we're gonna have to do is actually make the directory that we're gonna be housing that key in, which is this command right here. All right, now that we've made that folder structure, let's go ahead and actually copy that cert over into that folder structure so that that certificate authority can pick that up when we restart it here in a minute. Now that the cert is over there, that certificate authority cert is moved over there, let's go ahead and update the certificate authority trust. All right. Now that certification should be used by Docker so that we should be able to actually connect to the system using that self-signed cert because our system does trust it at this point. So next, we're going to go ahead and run this Docker command here, which is actually going to create our passwords for us so that we can actually put a password on our registry. So what we're going to do here is we'll go ahead and paste this in, but you can see we've got these two areas right here, the username and the password, that we're going to have to update ourselves for whatever account we want to create here. For me, I want to make this simple because this is just a demonstration. So we'll go with admin as the username, and then let's use those super secret passwords. We'll use password 123. That way we can have a very secure system here. What this is going to do is it's going to stand up a new Docker container where it's going to run the script to create a password file here. And then we're going to go ahead and use that password file later in our YAML so that we can actually use that username and password in a secure method to do authentication. All right. Now, after that got stood up, ran that code, and then tore back down, now we are good to go here. We can go ahead and start creating our YAML file. Now, this YAML file is actually just going to be created right here in the directory that we're already in. So, of course, if you did change this, we are just going to sit right at the root level, specifically because of how we're going to set up the Docker YAML file here. So now that we're in V, we're going to go ahead and use I so that we can insert the code. And then this code right here is actually what we're going to go ahead and copy and paste in so that we can get all of that information into our system here. And to explain this a little bit more, we're just grabbing the most recent version of the registry that they've published. We're calling the container registry. We're actually going to open this up to port 443, and we're opening it on port 443 on the system here. And then what we're going to do is we are changing the IP address port to 443 so that it officially starts using that as its service port. And then we're going to assign the TLS certificate to that cert that we created just a little bit ago, and the TLS key, which we also just created in that file. That auth file that we literally just created, we are going to use that one here. We're going to say that that's the file name that we're specifically looking for, and the password or that password file location is the file we just created as well. And then last but not least, and I have no idea about this, I've tried looking into it, but I wasn't entirely sure, but we're just going to go ahead and keep this as registry realm. That's going to be what the password is. That's the realm that this is going to be in. So just leave that as is. I'm not entirely sure exactly where that's coming from, but I'm guessing that that's how that Docker command that we ran before is actually structuring that. If you guys know better than me, comment down below so that I can kind of get an understanding of what's going on there. I would definitely appreciate that. Beyond that, we were going to assign a couple of volumes. So earlier we created these volumes. What we're going to have to do is actually give them the full pathway to this. So the full pathway to where I created that file structure is actually in my home, and int admin is my user, and that's where that is going to be. So what I'm going to do here now is just go ahead and copy this. All right, after I've gone ahead and created all of that, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the escape key. I'm going to do a colon and then a WQ for write quit. And we're going to go ahead and close this file out. Now we have our YAML file that we can use to build up and then tear down our registry when we need it. Now, I will say that a note here, I am showing you how to do auth and TLS for this. Of course, there are other options you can do to add more security to yours if you want, but I'm going to do basic security here. I do have a link here in my documentation if you would like to start digging into that more and actually add some additional security to yours, but that's where we're going to start for right now. So next, let's go ahead and actually stand up the Docker container. Now, this is super easy to do. What we're going to do is just run a sudo docker compose, because we're actually in the file, or we're at the file level of that Docker compose file YAML that we just created. So we don't have to give it any kind of file or anything like that. We're just going to run sudo docker compose and then up -d, and this will start our registry for us. It'll go ahead and pull that down. Then it will kick off that registry. Now that we're in there, just a side note, if you do ever have to change your YAML file, change any kind of settings, anything like that, and need to tear this down and then stand it back up again, I've got that command right here. All it is a docker compose down. We'll bring it back down. Then you can run that up -d again, and it will stand it back up for you. But now we actually have our Docker container running. So let's go ahead and verify that we do using this command here. Now, this is going to allow us to authenticate on HTTPS to our local host on 443, which would be that container registry that we just mentioned. Then what we're going to do is we are sending basic auth here to go ahead and pass our username, which I gave as admin, and password as password123. And then if I hit enter here, you can see that I end up getting this repositories has nothing in it, but I am getting a successful curl to that. So I am pulling everything down. All right, at this point, we've got our Docker container built for our registry. It is up and running. We are good to go. Now we've got an option of what do we want to put in it? Of course, this is where we get to that. What are you using this for? Are you using this for your own personal images, for automations that you're creating, and apps that you're creating? Or are we actually going to be using this for a air-gapped environment? For me, I'm planning on doing a two-part series here. We're going to be doing an air-gapped environment. So let's go ahead and talk about the mirroring images. So what we're going to do is first, to run that script, we're going to have to install the JQ software there. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, now that the JQ system is installed, now we're going to go ahead and run the mirror all images script. Now, the way that we're going to get that, of course, I've got a link directly to that if you want. And then if you want some more information on that, of course, I have the KB article down here for IBM Security Source Platform. But I also wrote a curl command right here that'll just go out and grab this for us. So we'll go ahead and run this so that we can create that script on our system as well. Now that that script is on my system, now we're going to first have to log in using Docker. And then once we log into our new registry using Docker, we can go ahead and run that mirror script. So let's log in first. All right, now you can see that I have successfully logged in here, so we are good to go. So now we will go ahead and run the actual mirror all images command. Now I will note that if you want to, you can use the latest tag, I guess we'll call it, on the very end of the script. But specifically for an air-gapped environment, we don't want to do that. We want to use the full mirror, because the full mirror will give us different versions that our system is actually going to specifically want to use. So let's go ahead and run that command. So we're going to run the command, giving it the tags localhost because we're connecting to the local host. And then, of course, if you wanted to have a specific port, you would just add a colon and whatever port number you're connecting to on the end of that localhost command. And then we're also going to add the Docker so that it knows we're going to use Docker here and not Podman. Podman is your other option, but we're using Docker for our environment. So let's go ahead and run that now. Now, as this runs, it's going to take it a while for this to fully complete. So while this is running, I'm going to go ahead and stand up another instance of our putty session here so we can take one step forward and use the commands down below here to move on to the next step here. All right, from here you can see I've got another instance. This one's running in the background so that it can get all those images mirrored over. But I've got another instance here where we're actually going to run these Docker commands. Now, I will state here at the beginning, you do not have to run these Docker commands if you are not planning on running this air-gapped. The only reason that I'm grabbing these images is because I'm planning on running air-gapped. So do not run these if you're not planning on running this as an air-gapped system. But now let's go ahead and move forward. All right. So what we're going to do here is first we are going to pull a couple of Docker images down and their specific versions in which we're going to need those to run this in that air-gapped environment. So let's go ahead and run these commands here to pull all three of those images. All right, now that we've pulled those images down using Docker, now what we're going to do is go ahead and tag all three of those images so that they're ready for our new environment that we're going to be running these in. All right, now that they've all been tagged for our new registry, now what we're going to do is push those tagged items up and into our registry. So now we're going to run these last three commands so that we can get those pushed up and in there. All right. Now that we've got those pushed up in there, we're good to go. We've got everything running, and now we just have to finish waiting for this to run. So we're going to let this finish running. It's going to take a while, but we'll be back here in just a little bit so that we can touch on this. All right, and now that we have completed the mirror all images script, now we can actually run that curl command again to verify that we have more images in there. Go ahead and paste that in there. And you can see we've got quite a few images in there, so we're good to go and ready to run with this repository. So this is how to build the repository. This is the quick and dirty guide to that. Of course, you can use this to put your own apps in there and publish your own apps so that you can run all of your apps through your repository if you want to run the repository locally instead of using something more like a GitHub that's already set up and available for you. Now, in the next video, we're going to cover how to actually use this repository that we've built here to build a air-gapped environment. Join me back on the next video where we will cover the air-gapped environment and how to get all that set up. And I will see you guys next time.